All right, it's 5 minutes after. I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting. We have a couple of things that I think will take a few minutes anyway. First off, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and then I'm going to have Miss Lois Benson give our invocation and pledge. If you would, please stand.
Could we just sit at
Okay,
first,
yeah.
if you don't mind? Sorry.
Absolutely.
Before I do the invocation, I just want to make some remarks, if I might, and this is sort of irregular, but I would just, if you will indulge me. I've served in a number of elected offices, as many of you know. I was on the city council, I was in the Florida legislature, and ECUA, and this is over the course of about 30 years. And I have observed that virtually every elected body has what I call its groupies. And maybe there's a better word. Their motivation varies. Some like the sound of their own voice, especially if it's amplified by a microphone. These blather on using all of their allotted time. Some are disgruntled and angry. They rail at whatever the issue of the day is. Some have a single issue. We at ECUA have had our share of groupies. Ernie Rivers, you might remember, who recently died, by the way, was passionate about the environment and came during the moving of the Main Street sewage treatment plant. We had our Satanist, who chanted and disrupted meetings, protesting our practice of opening with a prayer. He always scooted out after his rant during open forum. He had no interest in the actual business of the utility. We have one gentleman who comes once a year to protest rate increases, politely making his point. But the best of our groupies are those who are driven to make our community and our democracy a better place. Such was Barry Tweedy. I was appointed to this board in 2004. Since that time, and probably since long before, Barry Tweedy rarely missed a meeting, and it wasn't easy. A military veteran who served a tour in Vietnam as an Army paratrooper, he later joined the National Guard, and then went on to earn his wings of gold at NAS. His military career was cut short by a debilitating injury. Left a paraplegic, he was confined to a wheelchair. But he came, along with a series of caregivers who helped with logistics of moving him from place to place. Mr. Tweedy had served on the CAC before I came on the board. He ran for the District 5 seat against Dr. Walker in a race that was a model of gentlemanly behavior. No ugly mailers, no name-calling, no railing about rates, just two people talking about policies. Sort of quaint, at least in today's political environment. He lost, but he kept coming anyway. He always studied the agendas and did homework on the issues, digging deeper than just the staff report. Sometimes, most of the time actually, he just observed. Sometimes he spoke, quietly, reasonably. He added nuance to the discussion. I only saw him really angry one time. When we turned and recited the pledge, our Satan-worshipping agitator turned his back on the flag. Barry told me after that meeting that he fought for that flag, even sacrificed his ability to stand and salute the flag of the country he loves, so that people like him could dishonor the symbol of our country. Today, the chair over there, that Mr. Tweedy faithfully occupied, is vacant. He died on January 4th at age 68. In his obituary, the first paragraph described his military service. The second paragraph was devoted to the ECUA. The third was about his family. Three things ultimately defined his life: country, ECUA, family. So I ask you to join me for today's prayer, and I ask that we remain seated in honor of Mr. Tweedy. Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for the life and service of Barry Tweedy. Thank you for those who rarely make headlines, whose names make the paper only once in the obituaries. For those who do not hold office, but hold those who do accountable. For those who persist in making a difference in our country, our community, and our democracy. In a time of insurrection, political discord, and polarization, Lord, please send us more Barry Tweedies. Amen.
Amen.
And please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before I turn off my speaker button, I would love for us to put a plaque on that podium in memoriam for Mr. Barry Tweedy. Thank you.
I agree, and I would donate to that cause. Thank you very much. We move now to the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion? And thank you, Ms. Benson, for doing that. He was a very, very kind man. Do I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
I'll motion that we adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Ritz.
I have an item to add under committee communications.
Okay,
Is this the appropriate time to?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
what's your item?
It's the duties of a CAC member within a district.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
typically under committee or board communications at the end, we don't have, I mean, I'm fine with the agenda item, but we don't have to have an agenda item. A lot of times people will just say, something may come up in the meeting where you have something to say about it at the end. So a lot of times it's just Happy Easter or whatever.
Right.
But I don't want the committee members to think that they have to get an agenda item on to say something
Exactly.
during communication. the
Yeah,
communication
exactly.
portion.
If you ever want to add anything, what he's saying under committee communications, you can add that without putting it on the agenda. But anytime you want to add an agenda item prior, you just let me know at this time and we add it and then vote on it. So, do we have any other additions, amendments? I have a motion. Is that with this added, Ms. Schneier?
Yes.
Thank you.
As far as the CAC members within a district, we would also need the at-large duties.
All right. And do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Any further questions, additions? If not, please vote. For any new members, make sure your little green button turns green.
Or the red one, either one.
Or the red one. And it passes 10-0. We move now to open forum, and we have, I first want to welcome State Representative Michelle Salzman. She's here regarding a proposed ECUA bill, and I think first we're going to go with Michelle coming up, Representative, and telling us a little about how she started and where she's gone with it now, and then we'll have staff, Bruce, and our attorney weigh in, and then we'll allow questions from the CIC. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. It's my joke because today feels like I'm still at 7 a.m. First of all, I'd like to thank the incredible feedback I've received from those that were actively engaged. The reason why I ran for office is because I felt like we needed collaborative leadership in the community from the local authorities all the way up to the state level. And I requested input from everybody early on, and I asked everybody to stay in touch with me because I have no idea what it takes to run a utility authority, and gosh, that's I don't want to really to know. I'll let y'all do that. So it's imperative that the feedback from you guys is received, so I don't create any unintended consequences for the community and the constituents. But we did receive the grand jury report right after I was elected. It became public, and knocking 14,000 doors. A lot of folks demanded term limits and some other things, and so with the grand jury report and the constituents demanding something, I went to state leadership and said, okay, what do? I have no idea what to do. And we have some really smart folks at the state that were very helpful. The Public Service Commission was helpful. Jimmy, the CFO of Florida, was super helpful. He's going to continue being a part of the conversation for a couple of years. But and then, of course, our local bill writing attorneys at the state were very helpful. And then I have the best delegation in the state. I tell everybody, my Alex, my Jair, these are my people, and I'll share them with you, but I have some incredible people. So the first bill draft that I received, Senator Broxson, who has been my rock through this, what a great partner, and I met with your executive director, Mr. Woody, and we just dove into this and said, we're doing something, and we didn't really know what it looked like. The first draft of the bill was, I was very persistent. Please don't think this draft is what we're going to have. It's like a painting or a book. It's not complete. Please don't think that I'm going to hold you to all of these things. I don't even know what half of it means. You know, this is just what the state did based off of the grand jury report and some feedback that I'd given them and some feedback I got from the county commissioners that I had met with. I met with all of them about ECUA. And by the way, none of them want your job. They all said, I don't want that. So that was good feedback. But so I don't want it and they don't want it. So we shouldn't be telling you how to do it, right? That should be you telling us what you need. So, which I think that's where we're at now. I think you guys told us what you need. And I hope that we gave you all that we could as far as changing some verbiage and some policies. And I was telling Vicki Campbell that we still have about a week left. If there's tiny words we can change, then let me know, little paragraphs, comma, all those little punctuation things that the attorneys find. We still have a little bit of time to do that. It just can't be big things. It must keep the meat of things. But we can also do another bill next year. This is now that we're past the hard part, it's easy. If you see something in 6 months that you don't like that's causing you guys pain and suffering when you're doing anything at all in operations, you just come tell me and I'll be the first to file it. I think that me helping you is helping the constituents, and it's important that we do that. So it was a long journey. It was a lot of pain and a lot of suffering for many of us, not just me, but you guys too. I think a lot of it was just the anxiety of you guys not knowing that you could really trust that I was really trying to do what was best for you and with you. But hopefully you guys see that now. The only thing that I'm putting on there that was not requested of a majority of you is the term limits, but I'm held to term limits. The senator's held to term limits. All state reps are held. All state offices have term limits. So I'm not imposing something on you that's not on me. And we did put the retroactive or whatever that is clause in there, so it didn't feel like this was against any current board members, because it's not. You guys are really the rock of this group. You have most of the information, the institutional knowledge that it takes to really guide the new members. So it's certainly, that was not my intention. And so we put that in there. It was at 8 years, but I moved it to 12, and I did that because I learned that 10-year was your investment or your something to do with your retirement or something like that, and I'm not trying to mess with anybody's money. I will never do that, so we moved it to 12 years, so it's 3 terms. I have 4 terms of 2 years. The senator has 2 terms of 4 years, so you guys have an extra 4 years for us, but yours is a little different the way your retirement or your investment structure is, so we just want to make sure. I don't want to cause anybody any undue harm. So we did three terms of 12 years, and it starts July, I think, 1st. So if you're on the board, no matter how long you've served, you can do this 3 more terms, and hopefully that gives everybody an opportunity to prepare for whatever's next and hopefully continue to serve the community, because anybody that serves even 4 years in ECUA deserves a medal. But so here we are. I'm open for questions and feedback. I requested to come so I could hear from you guys. I know Mr. Woody is going to provide some input as well, but I wanted to make sure you guys knew that I really did mean what I said when I want to hear what you have to say. So I scheduled to come here tonight to get your feedback. Our delegation meeting is tonight in a couple of hours, really. So I know it's kind of short notice, but like I said, this is a working document, and I'm willing to run that bill as often as I need.
Thank you, Michelle, and if you're welcome to sit down, but just stay handy. I'm going to let, I'm sure people will have some questions. I'm going to let Mr. Woody, and he may want Robert's inputs at some point, go ahead and speak next.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Woody.
In my experience, writing legislation is a very iterative process. It begins with a draft of some sort, and the best results of legislation generally is one that involves a lot of stakeholders and goes back and forth between the various affected parties, everybody being able to give their point of view, ultimately coming up with the best consensus among all those affected in order to find a positive result for as a final outcome. I would like to express my appreciation to Representative Salzman, who, as a freshman legislator whose first foray into this at the state level, gets it from the very beginning, because she contacted us right up front, shared her proposed legislation, gave us an opportunity for feedback, not just first time around, but through various iterations and evolutions of the bill. And at the same time, also, particularly here at the end, we made a special request to use this as an opportunity to clean up some language that we ourselves know need to be addressed for various administrative reasons, and that was very welcomely received by her and the delegation. So I'm pleased with the result that we have come up with. I shared with the board and the CAC earlier a kind of a white paper that spelled out issues and concerns from the earlier versions. There were term limits discussed at various points in time, discussions about various forms and means by which procurement occurs in the organization, a little bit of discussion about even this CAC member, CAC committee, whether it's required or strictly the choice of the board to have a CAC member or CAC committee, as well as some discussions about how we execute and deal with payment of bills and documents and the frequency of our management efficiency audit. We had various iterations and discussions through those and came to some good compromises on those, and a few of them went away. For instance, the discussion about procurement. There was some discussion, probably the bulk of my white paper that I delivered to the CAC committee had to do with that particular topic. Chapter 13 of the ECUA code has a fairly detailed procurement code for the ECUA. That has worked well for us. I think does need to be reviewed and further upgraded, but it doesn't fit. Our small organization wouldn't fit well with the way that the state of Florida deals with procurement, just because the scope and size and scale of that organization is so much different than ours. So I appreciate the dialogue that we went through in order to come to some resolution on that particular topic, especially. So what's before you is a nice summary of the back and forth that we had over a period of time. We did add some items in the last few days that are, as I said, are specific to administrative needs that the ECUA has in order to clean up a couple of things that have just evolved over time. And most of these were written by our board attorney and broadly cover such subjects as how we deal with personnel. There's references to the old Civil Service Code when in fact we've had an HR manual for some time, so we've made some amendments in various sections there as well, and some other administrative cleanup. If our board attorney, Robert Beasley, would like to address some of those changes that were added in and were mentioned in the copy that I sent out to each of you this morning.
Did everyone get a chance to read the copy this morning? Okay, good, great.
Good afternoon, members of the board, Madam Chair. Robert Beasley, as you know, and I have worked on this bit of legislation, which came at a fortuitous time for us because, as you may recall, when I was hired on in July of last year, I guess, one of the things that we first were asked to do is look at the code itself, our code, and start to revise that code. It has some issues. It doesn't flow right. It's not on our website. There are some antiquated portions of it. And so we just started working section by section. And in some of those sections, we realized that not only was the code antiquated and not reflective of our current practices, but it related back to the enabling statute, which is what was driving the antiquated aspect. And so I kept piling up things for future legislative change, knowing that we were going to have to go to the Florida legislature at some point. And I thought we'd finish the code, but we have finished the sections of the code in which the glaring issues are present. There may be some more issues in the future, and I know Representative Salzman invited us to reach out to her if we find additional issues. But I think, fortunately, the timing was such and fortuitous that it just happened to be that I had this pile of things that needed to be fixed, and this bill came upon. And the last thing I want to say is that I was part of the interview and hiring process with Mr. Woody, and not one of you asked whether he had any qualifications as a lobbyist or as any type of political skills at all. But he has shown an exceptional set of skills with white papers and lobbying efforts and bill imagination and so forth, pretty much carrying the lifting. And I did very little in this process. And I'm a little jealous because I have no engineering skills at all. And so Bruce did a great job with all of this and carried most of the load on it. I just want to briefly tell you a couple things that are going to be changed that I think is really beneficial to the ECUA and turns out to make this a real win for ECUA. First one is, and just by section, I'm in section 4 under governing body, and it's 4B. And I'm just going to summarize. I'm not going to read to you, but I'm just going to summarize the vacancy issue. As everyone remembers, we had a tremendous problem with the vacancy issue when we lost Mr. McCorvey. The governor wasn't making appointments. This governor was very slow on appointments to start with when he took office and still is behind on appointments. And so we sat without that district being adequately represented with no recourse. This section provides for a fail-safe mechanism that if the governor doesn't fill the vacancy, then the chair can nominate 2 from that district, and then the board can vote on that seat. And then that seat remains until the next occasion. And so that was one of the issues that I had put in place that we were hoping to fix and were able to fix. I think you can hear me without my mask on, with my mask on, so I'm going to try to put it back on. So that was a big one. That was a real problem. The other one, which was not such a big one, but it's a nice point of clarification, is the provision related to the inclusion of 76828, which is the sovereign immunity statute. Now, the ECUA is underneath that statute, and it is protected under it, and many courts have recognized it. So this isn't really a change at all. But what has occurred is it's hard to get there, and so what I have found as your legal counsel in some courts, I have to show the judge, okay, the judge, this statute over here says these things, and it lists this one thing, and if you go over here to this statute, then we're that one thing, and you can tell that we're that one thing, which is an independent special district, if you go over to this statute, which defines it. So we have to bounce through 3 or 4 different statutes, which is unusual, and that's because the sovereign immunity statute that's in place came after the ECUA Enabling Act. So what typically would have happened for an agency like this is that had the statute been in place when the Enabling Act was passed, it would say, and you're subject to the protections of 76828. It would just say that, so that no one has to go grab pieces and parts to put it all together to prove to a court that we are subject to it. Well, now this is a chance to catch this up and add a very clear line, just says we're subject to the protections of it, which doesn't change anything materially. It just makes your life a little bit easier. It also, we believe, will help you with your insurance issues and rating on that, because it's so crystal clear now that we can point that out to the insurance agencies. The other change that I thought was very helpful is when we get to a couple update items. So like in section 9, we have to post our meeting minutes and agendas and so forth and proposed assessments. We have to post a lot of different things for public notice. And the provision said the appropriate places that affected persons may be duly notified. Whatever that meant. I guess in 80-something they nailed it on an oak tree or whatever. But we just put on our website, right? Because that's how people find stuff now. So we brought this thing into the 2000s. Section 10. So Section 10 was truly an antiquated section that we no longer even followed. It had to do with how we dealt with our personnel, and it basically said that they were entitled to the protections and benefits under the civil service system of Escambia County and policies and procedures. Well, we haven't been under the civil service system for some time. We have adopted our own human resource manual and an employee handbook, and now that's what it says. It's subject to our employee resource manual and handbook, which is what it should say. And then the subsection of that, which is actually a little bit more complicated for us, is that it created this whole section, and I'm under section 11, of the Personnel Appeals Board, which was a board that was created under the civil service system that was functional back then, but which we're no longer part of, which we were still going through the motions of. And so we actually haven't used this procedure in some time. We use an entirely different procedure for dealing with employee issues now through the DOA, Division of Administrative Hearings. And so we have our own procedure. Our code is set, but our code doesn't actually match what our enabling statute tells us we're supposed to be doing. This is a great opportunity to fix that. A couple more little tiny ones. We have an appellate process internally, and it's under section 12, and it said, any person wishing to appeal an action. And since my tenure here, one has happened, one has occurred, and there was a great deal of debate about what an action is by the board, because it doesn't mean anything. And so we clarified that to say termination of services, assessment of fees, charges, fines, notice of claim, a lien, and a list. It's basically all of the things that an aggrieved person could bring, all the material issues that we thought that someone could feel aggrieved that the board has done that would impact them financially or otherwise, that then they can initiate this procedure so that we don't have to worry about what an action meant, because it's just not a defined term. It just wasn't good legislation to start with in drafting form. Finally, with respect to the executive director qualifications, we all knew this back when we were hiring Mr. Woody and doing all the interviews. One of the qualifications was that they had to run a utility system the size to or comparable to the system of the city of Pensacola in 1981. And it actually said that. And so Mr. Woody got in under the wire because we're not sure what 1981 system was. But the fact is we just said, as to the Emerald Coast Utilities Authority at the time of the vacancy. So the idea is we want someone that's running a facility that's as big as ours. And it makes total sense, and we don't have to track back to whatever 1981 was doing in the city of Pensacola. So those changes, as you can see, most of them are just cleanup, updating the statute, clarifying in a lot of ways. Again, this was my list, and I thank Representative Salzman for working with us on this, because we were going to have to do it anyway. So it turns out to be a great thing for us and very timely. That's all I have. If there are any questions of me.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. Mr. Perkins has a question, I believe.
No.
Oh, no? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Perkins, would you like to speak?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that that once you become a state representative or a senator, your time is very precious. I mean, you're always have real high demands on your time. So if at any point you need to go, please don't think we're going to be offended and feel like you have to sit here and wait for everybody to give our speech and all that. We realize that. But I did want to echo those comments, that I've heard, and thank you for being transparent and everything about the process. When I take an action, I ask myself, will my action make the world a better place? Will my actions serve the best interest of the community? Are my actions free of selfish motives? And are my actions helpful to others trying to have a happy and satisfying life? And I think in looking at the proposed legislation that it meets those criteria. And so I think that initially when I met with Representative Salzman, I was a little bit apprehensive, and a lot of times you'll meet with elected officials or politicians and they're saying one thing to you and they're just bald-faced lying, and you have to account for that. But she's been transparent and sincere throughout the process, and I appreciate it, and can support and back these changes, and just wanted to say thank you for that, and don't let us hog all your time if you need to go, because I know how stressful that is sometimes when you're in a time crunch.
Thank you, Dale. And I'll call on the next person. I would like everybody to try to do the same as Dale, keep it as minimum as possible so that we can let Ms. Salzman go so she can have a break between now and the 5:30 meeting. So with that said, Ms. Benson.
Thank you, and I want to echo the thank yous. What started out as a bill that we didn't like much has evolved into something that is acceptable to all of us, and I thank you and the entire delegation for making that happen. A couple of comments. One is you said something about doing this again next year. You know, there was an old saying when I was in the legislature, no one is safe when the legislature is in session. If we can avoid this next year, I'd be very happy. Okay, yeah, okay, right. The other issue I would like to address is term limits. I think everyone on this board has said, sure, it's okay, we're glad you went to 12, and frankly, it's no problem to me. If I'm elected next time and serve 12 years, I will be 87, so I think it will be time for me to go. But, you know, 8 is enough was one of those sound bites that nobody could resist. And it came in 1992, the year I was elected to the legislature. And so we were the first group elected under term limits. And, you know, it still read me. People love the idea of term limits. But I think at some point we have to say, has it accomplished anything? You know, I served with people who were longtime legislators, who were seasoned, who learned leadership, evolved to becoming a speaker, and really accomplished great things. As you know, the speaker for your last term is selected in your first few weeks as a legislator. This is somebody who has never carried legislation, doesn't know the first thing, has not really proven his collegiality with groups. It's not a good thing. I mean, we have a United States Senator who never passed a bill in the legislature because he was named Speaker, and you go on a different track. You know, we have now a revolving door between the House and the Senate. We haven't limited any terms, we're just doing this. And the impact of term limits is to empower lobbyists and bureaucrats. You know, one of the things in the grand jury report was that we caved in to our staff. Well, term limits will guarantee that. Now, I'm not going to fight this. I understand the reality of it. But at some point, we need to have an honest debate with the public and with each other about what term limits do and don't do. And one other thing, it has hurt Northwest Florida. The one thing that we did that made us powerful is we kept electing powerful legislators. And South Florida turned them over like this. So ours accumulated this wealth of power, and we could hold our own against the much larger numbers of South Florida. Again, this in the bill is fine, but it's hard for me to look at something that I think is basically wrong and not speak out. But anyway, I will support your bill. I thank you for including our changes that Mr. Beasley has suggested. I thank you for working so closely with Mr. Woody and with all of the members. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Kevin Stevens.
Thank you. And Representative Salzman, I want to address and echo what our director and our other board members have said about thanking you for allowing us to give you our input. You know, I'm one of the newer elected board members, as you know, so I too am new to politics, as are you. So I was pleasantly surprised to see the process of having a state legislator, and maybe that's the way things are normally done, but if not, they should be. But I do believe you went above and beyond getting our input. It's certainly this new revised legislation is much different than the initial one. The initial one had given me a little heartburn as well. And but again, like I said, I appreciate it. You know, when I ran for District 5, I too knocked on a ton of doors, and I think 7 to 9 and 4 to 7 were my corner days talking to folks. And I ran on transparency and accountability, as well as term limits. And, you know, obviously this bill came to fruition as a result of the grand jury report. And this was one of the context of that, along with the transparency and accountability. So I think this bill does a lot to answer satisfy or address some of the issues in that report. And obviously, we're looking at doing going on to bigger and better things. And as I tell multiple constituents who call me daily and send me emails, and they give me their gripes and complaints, and they talk about the past, the first thing I say to them when I get done listening to them is, we have a brand new director. And the guy's a rock star, and we've got a brand new attorney, and that guy's a rock star. And a lot of the issues in your complaint, a lot of the issues which were justified, which were completely justified, were as a result of that previous administration. So that's the first thing I tell them, is that we are so blessed to have a great director like Bruce Woody, and then a new attorney, Robert Beasley, who are going to light years ahead of what we had before. So again, thank you for allowing us the input to help shape this bill. And I too, along with the other board members who have addressed you, also support it. So thank you again.
Thank you. Ms. Ritz.
Thank you. Again, I echo the sentiment of, we're so glad you're here. As I was listening to the term limits, of course, I'm not in favor of that, because in a way that denies the electorate a chance to pass confidence or non-confidence on those running when you limit the terms. I did not see in the writing the research that shows term limits are positive for a utilities authority. When I came on board the CAC, I was very amazed at the scope of the authority. And of course, over time, they added recycling and composting, which I thought was absolutely outstanding. But again, I have not seen research that says it's of benefit, especially when you have your electorate having a voice. And to me, it takes away from the electorate's voice capacity. So would you be so kind to enlighten me as to what these statistics are for
Please address
term limits?
Ms. Ritz, address them to me,
Oh,
and
I would like
we'll
to
have
have
Michelle.
her
I'll have Michelle come up and,
address that.
okay.
Thank you.
And Michelle, you can answer the question.
I did not bring any paperwork with me to answer questions, especially nothing specific like that. I can tell you the reason why term limits are in the bill is because it was recommended by the grand jury report, as well as it was one of the #1 things that my over 2,000 constituents replied to me with and what they'd like to see with ECUA, as well as speaking with the state leadership, attorneys for local bills, as well as the other experts that I spoke with. And just being a Republican, we typically tend to support term limits. I believe, though I understand and can listen and relate to some of the comments that are being made about term limits, I disagree as well. So being one that likes term limits, one that the constituents resoundingly asked for term limits, that's really all the constituents asked for when it came to ECUA with the grand jury report was term limits. I mean, speaking with your District 5 representative, Mr. Stevens, he said this pretty much the same thing. It was just term limits they really wanted. The rest of the stuff that the grand jury recommended that was put in the original bill, nobody really, I mean, they wanted transparency and that oversight commission or whatever, but I mean, everybody looked at that, even myself, and said, how the heck are we going to get that? Like, no, that's so much government. But to answer your question, that's how we got to term limits for statistics and all that. I apologize. I'm just a representative. I am no statistician. I am no mathematician. And I just got to the book, so I'm not really a seasoned politician. But Ms. Ritz, if you really want me to get data on that, if you shoot me an email, I promise you I will get you any answer to any question you have that I am capable of getting. But that's my why wasn't statistics. My why was what the constituents asked for, what the grand jury report asked for, and the consensus of the leadership that I spoke with, and how we could make these changes actually please the people, please the grand jury report, and create some sort of accountability. I'm sorry, that's...
I would like the information.
Sure, you have to just shoot me an email and just tell me what you want, and I will make it happen.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Ms. Schneier.
I think the lesson has already been learned. I don't think this board is going to give the new executive director or anyone else sole authority to conduct any business. As far as term limits, they're good and necessary for some elected positions, but I think the voters decide term limits in every election. Term limits, like I said, are great for a number of elected offices, but regarding a special district, they take away the will of the people. ECUA is a special district. It's the only utility of its kind that has an elected board. It's its own legal entity. I think it's important to have a representative who knows about the system because it's so complicated and it takes years to learn. I recently lost an election. I've been coming to meetings, to all ECUA and Citizens Advisory Committee meetings. I've been on a plethora of tours of the Central Water Reclamation Facility, the compost operations, SCADA, MRF, you name it. I've seen it all. I still don't know. I have just scratched the surface of the knowledge that there is to learn. I think Mr. Williams is going to do a great job. I think he got elected, and that's what the requirement is to be a board member, is to be electable. He's elected. I think he's going to do a great job. I think he genuinely cares about the community. He's been asking all the right questions. I think he's been going on tours. He's been learning all that he can. He will have learned a lot in the 12 years, and then he's going to be cycled out. And I don't think that's right. I think he should be able to stay on because he is a caring person. As far as the grand jury report, I don't see how term limits could possibly prevent what happened from ever happening again. But like I said, I don't think that will be an issue with this current board. And I'm not for regulations in general, but I'd like to see more oversight on the companies that supply the chemicals to the water authorities to absolutely ensure that they are of the highest quality and safe for consumers. My top priority is public health and safety. And I think the longer someone is on the board, the more they know about ECUA and the better they are at making sound decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
You heard what she said, Madam Representative. But I wanted to say that I did read the grand jury report also. And many of the changes that have been recommended would also be recommended by me. But the board has recommended many of those changes as we've been going along. Term limits to me is a sticking point. I never wanted to stay here past my effective time. And I've kind of even put a time limit on myself to where, enough is enough. If they couldn't beat me, then I'll train the next person to be as successful. So that was what I would have hoped would have been the way it would be looked at. Let the one who wins continue to train those who will succeed them at some time in the future. So that is my biggest thing. And then I think you want to walk through scenarios. You want to walk through scenarios where we have two new board members currently. And then if you have 3 or 4 with less than 8 years of experience, then the authority to not let the grand jury happenings happen again are tilted towards the rock stars, who I think are absolutely just that good. I have, the utmost confidence in the attorney and the executive director, but there is a balance of power and a balance of knowing what needs to be done. And with term limits, that potentially could not be in place, and what you're trying to fix could become a new problem with a new name. So those are my comments. Otherwise, I'm very supportive of your legislation. I think you have been forthcoming and open to comments from us as a board, and I do personally appreciate that. Knowing you before you were elected, it's good to see that you are still that person who is accessible and wants to do the people's work. So if possible, consider it in such a way that a scenario is not created where what you're trying to fix is creates a new problem with a different name. Thank you.
Thank you. Last, Mr. Kimball.
Yes, thank you. So I would agree with a lot of the comments that others have made so far, and I think, as Ms. Schneider pointed out, this is not, a lot of people probably incorrectly assume that ECUA is pretty simple, but there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on, and so I think it does take a significant amount of time to figure out what's going on and how things operate, and there's so many moving pieces. So, but, personally, I think term limits, I support that. I think it's a good thing. I think, but I think that's one of the values of this committee. And so, it would be my hope that even though this makes it to where the board can ultimately decide whether or not there is a Citizens Advisory Committee, I think it's a good thing to continue because it kind of gives someone an opportunity to come in and learn before they were in that elected position. So, kind of get their feet wet, understand things, and then so that way there's not that learning curve of, okay, now I've been elected, but I don't know what I'm doing. So, because otherwise, as Mr. Williams was pointing out, it does have that potential that we could have a board of people that have very little knowledge of how things operate. So, but that's why I think that there's a value in this. So I hope the board will, providing that this passes, the board will continue to keep the Citizens Advisory Committee because I think it's a good thing and there's some good input that goes along with that. But again, to echo everybody, I thank you for your willingness to change and be open to discussion about things because I know I reached out. I know initially there were some other things that I wasn't excited about in that, but clearly you've worked with everybody and I think this is a good thing that we have here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank everyone for their comments. I'm going to say a few words, and then I'm going to let you get on to your next meeting. But I have very much enjoyed working with you on this bill, and I sit on 2 or 3 government affairs committees throughout the state, one national, and if I could tell you guys how many bad bills there are out there, and bad government, and bad laws, you would be amazed. The redaction law in Florida right now is an accident waiting to happen. And it was made with really good intentions. So I know that Michelle, I'm calling you Michelle, State Representative Salzman's first legislative bill was made with very good intentions, as are many bills made with good intentions. But the way you went about it, of getting input from all the parties that were affected, that is what made it so nice for me to watch, because I've seen so many bills that weren't done that way, and we ended up with bad legislature and bad laws and things on the book that weren't even effective and couldn't be done. And the very most important thing to me is they're costly. So I appreciate your hard work. I also appreciate the hard work of Robert Beasley, Bruce Woody, Alex Andrade, Mr. Broxson, Kevin Brown. I was on the phone with y'all all weekend long, so I appreciate all that work. It's been a hard year for my constituents in District 1. COVID-19 has caused many of them to lose their business economic loss. Most of them have personal financial losses. Between COVID-19 and Hurricane Sally and the political picture, many are suffering and in fear. They're in fear of rising costs, rising taxes, and just the unknown. So I appreciate you working with my constituents' wallets and pocketbooks in mind while massaging this legislative bill. A lot of times politicians desire sound great until you look at the reality of the bill. And bills often end up looking a lot different in the end than they did in the beginning, like this one did. My favorite move by a legislator was not even a bill. It was the repeal of a bill. And so I will never forget Clay Ingram, as long as I live. His first move as a legislator was to repeal a really bad bill. And so I told Michelle about that, and we went on and moved from there, and I think what you've done is really good, working with us. And I couldn't, in good conscience, support any more regulatory. I think everybody here knows I fought Perdido Key mouse tunnels. I fought unnecessary backflow preventers. If you want to write a bill, I'll be over to Tallahassee and help you write that one. After reading Bruce's white paper on 287, I knew that it was going to be costly, and I think after you read it, you quickly realized it was going to be costly, so you took it out. I'm a lifelong Republican. I'm going to have to touch on the term limits, and I believe the power of the vote and the people to choose their leadership. So I'm personally against local term limits. Although I can't support them, I'm going to respectfully and humbly respect your decision to set them. I believe the grand jury wanted more oversight of ECUA employees. That was their number one thing that I heard. And to do that and set term limits is like, one defeats the purpose of the other. So term limits defeat the purpose of more oversight of ECUA employees. I think I want to end this by thanking you, but I also want to thank the grand jury. A lot of people were not happy with the grand jury, but I love the process of legislation, the process of government, all three sides of government. And so I appreciate the grand jury, and I think their report was well taken. I think this board and staff answered that with a new administrator, with a new attorney, who I might add are rock stars and doing a very fine job. But if we ever get lax, we do need reminding. So I appreciate the grand jury. I think that I thank them for their duty, and I thank them for their input, and I hope that we have made them happy. I'm still not for the term limits, but I hope they're watching this evening as you carry on, and I hope that they're happy with the changes that the ECUA has made, this board, our administrator, and our attorney, and as well as you and your delegation. And thank you for coming today and visiting with us. And I invite you back
Yes.
to see that treatment plant and the
absolutely.
recycle and all of the
I love
facilities.
tours. I'm going to close with, there's a lot of big wins in this bill that had nothing to do with my smartness or diligence. It was just your attorney and your executive director pointing out something. You guys are going to save the ratepayers money with the changes that we implemented, and it had nothing to do with Representative Salzman. And I think that is so incredibly powerful. What a huge win when you're talking to constituents about this bill. You can just talk about that all day. I was so over the moon excited when Mr. Woody called me and said, we have some changes, he talks very, and I was like, okay, listen, call Representative Andrade. He knows this lingo better than I do. If he's on board, I'm in. Easy, right? And he was like, okay, I'll call him right now. I was like, great, thank you. And so I just want to give some huge kudos to them, because they just saved, and that was really a lot of what this process should have been, reviewing the bill, and I'm happy to make any changes next year or the year after. If you have a little commas or whatever, we won't have to do all of this work. You just tell me what to change, and we'll put it in at the delegation meeting, kind of like the firefighters are doing tonight. And Okaloosa Gas, I've got a local bill with them too. But they're just doing something tiny and nobody even knows it's happening, so we can do that. I'm not asking you to do it, but I'm offering you to do it, because this was a lot of pain. I would also like to thank Kevin Stevens for just being an incredible advocate for you guys. I'm going to tell you, every change, he's like, listen, this 287 thing, and that's how he talks, right? He's very fast. But I was listening, and he saved the day in so many times where he was just like, Michelle, this really does not, I was talking to Bruce, I was talking to such and such, I talked to Vicky, what a great guy, really helped me understand why it was bad. And I didn't know if it was good or bad, and that's kind of what I said when I handed it to you, but all I needed to hear was it was wrong, and I told Kevin Kevin that last week. I said, show me why you don't need it. That's all I need, just show me. And he did, and that's all I mean, that was it. I'm not trying to do anything to anybody. I'm just trying to follow the process. So you guys are rock stars, and I'm just so incredibly grateful. I'll get you the information, email me. I've never had anybody ask me that, but I'm interested to know as well about the term limits, and I look forward to doing some great things with y'all. But I just wanted to let y'all know I really, really, really appreciated you guys just being a part of this, because that was the whole thing I ran on, was collaborative leadership. And boy, that would have been completely wrong if I did that and had no input. And Alex told me that. Rep. Ontario was like, how many board members are you talking to right now? I was like, crap. Okay. I get it. I got it, Alex. I'm going. So thank you guys. And if you're coming tonight, I'll see you tonight. Feel free to, obviously, I think I have some of you on the public forum agenda, and I look forward to hearing your comments publicly. But man, you guys won. That was such a great, those little changes that he did. I wasn't even hyped about doing this at all at any point. Was I excited about this? And knowing that we fixed some problems that'll help you guys with litigation and processes, that's a huge win. So I'm super excited about that. And I would be remiss not to say hi to my favorite wife over here. Hi. Okay. Thank you.
This was very good legislation. Thank you very much, Representative. We move now to approval of the minutes. On page 6, do I have any corrections or additions, or do I have a motion to accept approval minutes?
I'll move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Do you have a second? It's not a tough one. Ms. Ritz?
I second. Oh.
Thank you. Please vote. At this time, once we get this vote in, and it passes 11-0. At this time, I was asked by a member to please take a very short 3-minute break. So I'm going to take a 3-minute break, or 5 minutes. That'll give everybody time to go where they need, and come back. Thank you. All right, so I think we'll start making our way back to our seats. Start up again with item F, which is the adoption of General Resolution GR 2101 on page 10. This is a resolution authorizing extension of sole source annual agreement with ECUA Water Technologies LLC for the purchase of Aliquot and Bioxide Plus 71. Mr. Woody, you want to tell us a little about this?
One of the ways that we provide good service is not just the transportation, conveyance, pumping, et cetera, of wastewater for the wastewater services, but it's a product that's not without its unfortunate odors. So we're very careful and sensitive to the fact that we need to be good neighbors. You know, our infrastructure is throughout the community and in residential areas, et cetera. And we have certain wastewater pumping stations that are larger than others, and the control of odors is a supreme concern. So we have done a lot of research of what's out there in the industry, and we periodically try on a trial basis other sources, but we've had consistent good success with this particular brand. So we are recommending that we consider a sole source to continue with ECUA. They provide not only the product that provides the odor control, but they also provide the equipment used for its dosing, tanks, equipment, chemicals, et cetera. So it's a source that we use on a regular basis to help be sure that we don't have the types of odor problems that we might otherwise have if not for this program. If you have any technical questions, we also have Jerry Piscopo here who can answer some of those questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kimball,
I'll move the staff recommendation.
thank you. Do we have a second? Ms. Ritz,
I second.
thank you. Any questions or comments? If not, please vote. And it passes 11-0. We move now to item G, which is the adoption of General Resolution GR 2102. On page 14, the lowest bidder, General Resolution authorizing acceptance of the bid from Utility Service Company for the Navy Point Phase 4 Sewer Expansion Project. Mr. Woody.
This project we're really excited to see moving forward. You may remember we did break it into two parts, 4A and 4B. The two parts have comparable sizes in terms of the number of properties served, although this is the less expensive of the two, mainly because the 4B section that comes after it is significantly deeper and has a wastewater pump station associated with it. But this is a project we've partnered with a municipality, and they're doing some storm sewer work as well. This was competitively bid, and we're recommending award to Utility Services Company for their base and alternative bid amount of a little over $1.2 million. The authorization request we're asking for also provides a little bit of contingency to allow us some flexibility as the project proceeds if other items come up that we need to address.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a motion to get this one on? Ms. Benson?
I enthusiastically move for approval.
I thought you might. Mr. Brown?
I second.
Thank you. Please vote. And it passes 11-0. Move now to item H, which is adoption of General Resolution GR 2103, a general resolution authorizing transfer of project funds from CIP Project CR 526B from 9 Mile Road 1 I-10 to Pine Forest to CIP Project R001-Interiority Road Perdido Key Improvements. It's page 18. Mr. Woody.
This is in support of a FDOT project at the intersection of Perdido Key Drive and Interiority Point Road. We've had different relationships with FDOT. Sometimes we'll do our own work, sometimes we'll have outside contractors do work, or sometimes we'll just pay FDOT to have their contractor do work. Kind of depends on the scope and the particular issues at hand. In this particular intersection, staff recommendation is that we enter into a contract with FDOT, and they have their contractor coordinate the utility work and perform the utility work. We'll still, of course, certainly have our oversight and approval of the final work. Bids did come in a little bit higher than we had anticipated. Original estimates were a little bit dated, but we still support the recommendation. This resolution does include a small transfer in funds to supplement the original budgeted amount, but it's still our recommendation that for coordination purposes, it's in our best interest to have the contractor actually perform the work at this intersection.
Thank you. Ms. Benson?
Well, I move the recommendation, but I do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. And Ms. Benson, your questions.
This is a very, very busy intersection, particularly during beach season, starting spring break. It's always busy, but it gets increasingly busy. How long are we going to be slowing down traffic, and how fast will this project go?
I would defer to our
Mr. Hayden?
engineer, Stacy Hayden.
Good afternoon. Actually, I don't have a full schedule of the project at the moment, but this is not only ECUA work, but it's also the DOT, and they have their own schedule. I haven't seen the full schedule, so I apologize I don't have that information, but I will be happy to look it up and provide that to the members of the CAC.
Is this critical and urgent, would you say?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chairman, yes,
I'll
ma'am.
speak
It
in
is.
a minute on that.
I'm still getting used to the Roberts rules, so I apologize if I'm out of
Oh,
order.
sorry.
That's okay.
So, yes, it is pretty urgent. This project, as long as the DOT is out there doing work, have traffic interrupted for their portion, it's critical for us to get in there ahead of them and basically clean up a lot of piping. You have a lot of spaghetti mess out there with water pipes going different directions, and this would really clean it up and make operation and maintenance of our facilities much easier in the future.
And Madam Chair, may I continue?
Yes, please do.
I would hope that we would coordinate with FDOT and make sure that we are using the time as wisely as we can to interrupt the lives of those people and the traffic there as little as possible. And if there are creative ways to work at night or any of those things, or at least to get it done before spring break, which probably won't happen, but anything we can do to help with that.
Likewise, ma'am, we feel the pain. We certainly don't want to interrupt spring break. We're very conscientious about what our ratepayers' needs are, and we will make every effort to minimize the disturbance that we can. So,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the questions. And yeah, if you would get that to us as soon as possible. I live like throwing stone. And although this will create traffic for a brief amount of time, I think the end all is going to be wonderful, because at that intersection, there is currently no left turn. So if you're going to Perdido Key, there's no left turn lane to go down Gulf Beach Highway, or from where Interarity goes across the Gulf Beach Highway. There's no turn lane. And so even yesterday, and here it is January, my husband and I were going somewhere, and he goes, oh, great, somebody's trying to turn left on Gulf Beach Highway again. So when somebody tries to turn left on Gulf Beach, and I went with FDOT and sat at that intersection for 30 minutes just to show them what happens. And so when somebody goes to turn left, they sit there with their blinker on, and if there's a lot of traffic coming the other way, which there is because people still use Perdido Key Drive as a thoroughfare, they may sit there for 3 light changes. And the traffic very quickly backs up all the way to Blue Angel Parkway. So it makes it very difficult when you live in Perdido Bay Country Club Estates, and there's no red light. We have an accelerated lane now, but no way to get in or out of there. So I'm as a citizen that lives here, not the not ECUA, I'm very happy to see this on here and see it happening and know that it's going to happen quickly. And I think what happens in these situations is when they get that developer in there that's going to pay the bill or pay part of the bill, that it increases, it happens quicker. So we have I think it's not CVS, but Walgreens. Isn't it Walgreens that's going in there?
I don't.
I believe so.
remember.
Walgreens bought that entire corner, and so Walgreens and something else is going in there. So I think it'll move rather quickly because they're putting, that building's almost done. I mean, it's moving right along, so shouldn't take long. And I'm happy to see it happening.
Thank you.
Happy to see a left turn lane. Thank you. Any further questions? If not, please vote. Do we have a motion on the board? Yes, we do. Okay. Sorry about that. Hard to see this thing. It passes 11-0. We move now to item I, adoption of general resolution GR 2104, a general resolution authorizing extension of the sole source purchase of Purified odor control scrubber media with pump and process equipment for the purpose of replacement mixed bed odor absorbing media. Mr. Woody.
A moment ago, we discussed a chemical addition that we use to help control odors. We also have another means by which we help control odors, and that is a air scrubber system that is appropriate at some particular stations. We've had great success with this particular product. Unlike many others, it is a non-hazardous type of product, so we don't have to take samples of it. We can take it directly to the landfill. It's environmentally a good product as well. It is proprietary, therefore it would be a sole source procurement under Section 13-3B. But it's our recommendation that we continue at the same unit price as we had in our previous year contract with this agency.
Thank you. Mr. Kimball.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. We have a second? Mr. Brown?
I second.
Thank you, sir. I have one question. It's probably a question for Jerry. How often do we try new medias?
Madam Chair, we basically try different medias throughout. It wouldn't be every year, but different years, and we've tried several. The unique feature about this media is, one, it's got a high absorption, so it lasts a little bit longer, and it's got color changing in it, so you can tell when it's completely exhausted, which is a really nice feature when you're trying to get this stuff changed out. And then what we find with traditional carbon, straight up carbon medias, is they're a little bit harder to dispose of in that you have to get a sample, send it off to a lab, and Don can speak more about that, and before the landfill will take them because they have to be certified. Otherwise, you have to send it to a certain class landfill, which the closest one I think is in Mississippi, and then we have to pay that disposal cost plus the lab fee. So this media works a lot better for us. We can vacuum it out with our vac trucks and then transfer it and haul it over to the landfill and dispose of it pretty simply in a roll-off. So we've had a lot of success with it, and that's the reason why they've given, like ECUA has given us a price fix for the last 4 years and continues for the next 3. These folks have as well. We haven't had a price change in several years, so we've been able to negotiate holding the price steady because I threaten them with the bid process and anarchy. And the nice thing is, you know, we've had it occasionally. We do get an odor control complaint. It's tough when you get those because then you got to go figure out the source. Everyone's different. Where the places we've applied this, and ECUA and Alcoquit and Bioxide, you know, like Government Street and some of the other stations, we've neutralized the odor at almost 100%. So, you know, it's hard to go back and say, oh, we'll just test another media. Typically, when someone comes to me with another source of media, I'm like, well, where have you used it? And I check references before we even try it. And I'm trying to get a vendor now. See, and that's the other thing is the turnkey service you get, support. A lot of vendors, like I can't even get a vendor who's told me how great his stuff is to come back and actually test it.
Oh, wow.
And that's been going on for 18 months. So I'd like to get him in here. He does a lot with H2S abatement in oil fields and oil wells, that type of thing. But, that's a lot higher margin than wastewater, and we're a lower volume of consumption, so it's hard to get him to want to come back,
Well, that might change here shortly.
That's correct, yeah. So he might come back, yeah, right. The last 4 years, he's been busy. So,
So,
anyway.
we have a lot of new members on the CAC. How many lift stations do you have?
Well, it's gone up about 20 in the last few years, so we were at like 370-ish, and we're at 396 right now. And we're about to go over 400, so this year in my next budget year, you might see another crew added on, because they keep growing, and they're growing very quickly. And I would like to add, you remember the hurricane, how many developers have provided us a generator in those 20 developer lift stations? I've got 0. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so the ratepayers are going to be burdening the cost of generators if we continue to buy them at the rate, and then that's more personnel, more equipment to maintain, and so we're in a tough spot between Gulf Power, service to the customer and all those things. So there's a lot going on with lift stations and the continued growth, and Stacy's trying to balance it. We all are with capital and the consent order. There's a lot of issues at play.
Well, since we do have so many members, maybe you could give a presentation on lift stations
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
month, because that's a big part of what we do at CAC is, at ECUA is things go through a series of lift stations to get to the Central Water Reclamation Facility.
correct.
So it would be nice, it's nice for new members to see exactly how that works.
Right.
And one thing, this happened to me this week. I had a guy call, he wasn't even in my district, and that happens when you're on the board, people call, and my lift station stinks, and somebody told me, that's just the way it's been for 20 years. And I said, well, that's really not the way it needs to be, but what happens, I think, is people complain to each other and they don't complain to us. So if you ever hear that, then tell them to call their board member, and we'll call Jerry, and Jerry will go check it out, and maybe we need,
Right, and in this
new
particular
pipe.
case, we did the research on this one, and this is a difficult one because it's a beach-related lift station, and it's a long way from Perdido Key to Blue Angel Parkway, and then the seasonal flows change. And so there's a lot of things and factors in play, and I'll try and address some of those in the presentation. But
Wonderful.
it's not, there's never a simple answer. Every situation's different, and it's all about what people put down the drain, grease, milk, and other products which contribute to odors, and they don't realize that until it gets down the pipe and someone else is smelling it. So,
yeah.
anyway.
Thank you. I have a South Bay.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
in the middle of the summer, they call me quite often because Perdido Key's full, and they're between Perdido Key and the plant on Blue Angel, and they
That's
call
right.
me all the time. It stinks here. I said, well, why did your developer put the lift station in the front of the subdivision?
Well, and while we were out there, to your point, right next to this lift station was a vacant lot, and there's a house being built right now. So it's, the complaints will get worse, so we're going to try and figure something out.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate
yes,
that.
ma'am.
And just wanted y'all to know a little bit. Mr. Kirshner has a question.
Yeah, I just want
Yes,
to
sir.
say, I live in Lake Charlene. I'm living in Lake Charlene. I'm the president, and when Sally happened, the Gulf Power didn't respond, Cox didn't respond, and I got to tell you, I love your lift station out there. And
Thank you.
The service that you guys rendered was really extraordinary. So thank you.
Thank you.
for
Yeah,
doing that.
we were at work for, Mr. Woody was with me for 2 straight weeks, so it was hard for everybody, but
Yeah.
we did the best we could. We missed some, we weren't perfect, but we did the best we could with the folks we had. People get tired, mistakes happen, so,
You did great. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kirshner, for your remarks. Okay, thank you, and thank you for answering all questions. If there's no further questions, please vote.
I'm just glad we got an executive director that'll get out there after a hurricane and turn wrenches with the guys.
Isn't that the truth? Listen, and don't text him on Sunday, because he will answer. Okay, please vote. Bruce never sleeps, and he never gets away from that phone. And it passes 11-0. We move now to item J, adoption of general resolution GR 2105, a general resolution authorizing extension of annual service contract for clearing, grubbing, and construction of access roads and easements for Emerald Coast Utility Authority facilities and infrastructure. Mr. Woody.
As Jerry just mentioned, they have 389 lift stations that they currently maintain and thousands of miles of easement, likewise, that they own and maintain. The growth of vegetation across those easements, limbs overhanging our pump stations, all those things threaten our infrastructure. Whether it's a drop service of an electrical line that we need to clean up branches to try to protect, or just literally access to get to lift stations that are always seemingly in the most inconvenient locations because our system blows by gravity, so it's always down in the valley, down by the creek, difficult places to go. So it is more cost efficient for us to focus on what we do best, and that is maintaining our infrastructure, than it is to have staff cutting, trimming, mowing, some of those types of aspects. So we get a good bang for our buck through contracts for annual service agreements for clearing, grubbing, and construction of access roads for our easements. This particular contract is an extension of a prior contract. We had bid it earlier and allows for 2 one-year extensions, provided both parties agree to continue at the same bid price. HHH Construction is willing to extend next year, and staff recommends your favorable consideration to do likewise.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Woody, did this go out to bid? Do we need anybody else to bid on this, or they were the only, it says only response to bidders, so I'm assuming Triple H was the only contractor that submitted a bid or responded to the bid request?
In January 2020, a year ago, it was submitted for bids and has provisions for additional extensions. Jerry, you're going to have to tell me how many responses we had back in 2020, however.
Yes, sir. So there were 2 other bids that I believe that last year, this is bid several times, and this contractor's won it every year. The last year, I think we only had 1 other responsive bidder, and then it was found not to be, for some technical reason, I don't recall what it was, that his bid wasn't valid. So, and Triple H was the low bidder the whole time, so.
Okay.
That was the issue there. And I think a lot of people took issue with our bid because we changed how they priced into the structure of the contract for every mobilization. In the previous one, we had a gap so they could hammer us for mobilization and demobilization for every call. This time it's a fixed rate fee, and so a lot of people kind of were, changing how they bid it or took exception to it, which is why some of the other bids weren't compliant.
Okay, good enough, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good question, Kevin. So, yeah, we do, when we do have a bid winner, usually that contract has like a year or 2 years additional extension. And that's what this is an extension of last year's contract with no price increase. And right now, with prices going up through the roof, I always love to see one that says, yeah, we'll keep doing it for another year with no more money. So, but we don't like to just do that forever and ever and ever and ever. Good question. Thank you.
I make a motion we
Thank you, Mr. Kimball.
approve the recommendation.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. And please vote. And it passes 11-0. We move now to the informational reports on page 29 and 30 of your report. Do I have any questions or comments on the informational reports? If not, we move to unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business? If not, we move to new business. Do I have any new business that anyone would like to bring? And I believe, okay. I'm going to keep that on committee communications. So we move now to committee communications, and I know that we had Ms. Ritz and Ms. Michelle Schneier. And before I turn this over for your questions, I wanted to make a comment. As your CAC chair, I wanted, first off, to thank the Citizen Advisory Committee for everything that you do. I feel like you are one of the most important parts of the ECUA. I enjoy coming here every month and hearing what you have to say and the questions that you ask and the comments that you make. I was thrilled today. I knew a lot of board members weren't going to say anything about term limits because it's kind of self-serving. But for to hear the CAC talk about the term limits the way they did, it reiterated the way I felt about term limits, and I think other board members felt about term limits. So I appreciate your comments. As long as I am on this board, I will vote for a CAC to be in effect, because I do appreciate the CAC's input. I've never seen government take away citizens' voice, so I won't be the one to start. I think taking it out of the bill, of the act itself, I didn't understand the reasoning behind that, but you have my vow that for the time I'm on this board, I will always have a citizen advisory committee. I appreciate your input. And now I will go to your questions on duties. Ms. Ritz.
Thank you. At the previous CAC meeting, I heard one of the... Oh, thank you. At the previous CAC meeting, I heard one of the members talk about surveying in their district, and I thought to myself, well, should that be a duty of myself, because I've been serving for quite a few terms.
I'm sorry, you heard?
I heard from one of the members present at that meeting that that person was going out and surveying prior to the election.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought, well, is that something that a CAC member would be doing, surveying input from that district regarding ECUA? So that's my question. Is that something that we are encouraged to do, something that was new? I'd like clarification, please.
Thank you. And I believe you had a question. We're going to take them both at the same time.
Well, she had mentioned duties for the CAC members within their districts, but
And
I'm at large,
at
so
large,
I'm
okay.
the entire county. So.
Okay, so I'm going to have other board members weigh in, and I saw Mr. Perkins' light go on, so I'm going to have Mr. Perkins speak first.
Yeah, and excuse me, I agree with what Ms. Campbell says. I mean, you know, for years we had what was called a Citizens Technical Advisory Committee and a Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, and then we merged them into, you know, the overall Citizens Advisory Committee, and it's worked well for years. Frankly, I didn't know that we're even required to have one by the legislature. I've just always done it because we value citizen input, and it's been something that's been very helpful to me as a board member to hear. And I think that whether you realize it or not, you've all been serving in that capacity for quite some time, because we talk to our neighbors and our friends about ECUA issues. We gather their input and we bring that here and represent them. I mean, that's what you do as a Citizens Advisory Committee member. So I think the short answer to the question is yeah. I mean, that's kind of what you do, and what you're here for is to to take input from people, listen to them, use your own judgment and wisdom, because a lot of you are going to have a lot more experience being here and participating over the time than what you'll hear. You know, a lot of times we'll hear stuff from people. Most people have very little understanding about the technical application of policy. You know, they'll make a broad stroked comment and think that's right. I'm amazed sometimes at some of the comments I see on Facebook that they'll just be hammering ECUA for something with their garbage cans and their garbage service, and they don't even have ECUA service. They live in the city and they've got black garbage cans, but they're still hammering ECUA. So a lot of times you're going to have more knowledge than what they are. So in addition to receiving that input, part of the job as a citizen advisory committee member is to educate people, is to let them know what's going on, because you will have more access to information and to gather information. I mean, we're able to communicate. We know as Citizen Advisory Committee members, you know who to talk to. We know, if there's an engineering question that we can, shoot Stacy an email or ask the director. But I think that the board members value the Citizens Advisory Committee members and encourage you to get as knowledgeable as you can about things, take tours, ask questions. I always appreciate some committee members over the years have been in it for show, and some of them have been in it for process. So, the ones that have been in it for show will come into a meeting not having talked with staff about any of their questions and make all these absurd comments and everything and say this has got to be done and this has got to be done and this has got to be done, and it's political theater. And then there are the other ones who will forward those questions to staff and get answers, and then if there's things that need to be addressed, address them if they disagree with them, but at least we'll have done the research and gathered the information and not, blindsided staff or anything. They just honestly try to get the information and provide informed decisions. So I'm proud of every one of you and encourage you to participate as much as you can.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Stevens.
So to your comment, Ms. Campbell, in reference to the CAC, I have no idea why that was even in this bill. I'm not sure why that the CAC was addressed as far as not necessarily disbanding it, but not making it mandatory. Honestly, I didn't know it was mandatory to begin with, but I look at it personally as an invaluable resource. By the very nature of the meeting, of the Citizens Advisory Committee, for the citizens. So I think it's, in my opinion, invaluable. To your question, Ms. Ritz, speaking for myself, David Gaines was one of my recommendations to serve in multitude of reasons. He's kind of a pillar in his communities. He's very active in District 5. So he's got a good ear for what the folks out there are thinking and saying. So he helps me a lot. Individuals will contact him, and sometimes he can answer some questions or relay it to me. So as far as are you all able to survey individuals? I guess we're kind of surveying them all the time, because you're certainly listening to them and being receptive and questions and so forth, and hopefully you're advertising and telling folks what you do, and again, it's a very selfless job that you all have committed to, and I certainly appreciate that. So I hope you're surveying folks, and I hope that feedback is coming back to the board members. So there's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Mr. Woody.
Yeah, I'd like to make 3 comments on this topic. First, I'll point out a couple things that are actually in the code or in the enabling legislation, which don't really provide answers, but at least provide a little bit of context. In the original act, Section 17 discusses the Citizens Advisory Committee and only has 2 short sentences. It says, the authorities shall make provision for and appoint a Citizens Advisory Committee or committees. The appointees to such committees shall have no personal business ties with the authority that could be construed as a conflict of interest. That is the sum total of what the Enabling Act even says about the existence of the Citizens Advisory Committee. But then you move into the ECUA Code under Chapter 2, Section 61. There is a 12-point list of issues regarding standby committees, and there's some discussion here and there about qualifications and some things like that. The only direction that is really given about your charge is numbers 10 and 11, which says, first off, the committee shall review agenda items as determined by the ECUA board or by the executive director. And then number 11 says, the committee shall serve in an advisory capacity, formulating and presenting recommendations to the ECUA board. To the board's credit, they have made wonderful use of you as a resource. I come from the world of municipalities, having been a city manager, where I'm used to having 2 readings of every agenda item prior to it being voted on, so that the community has an opportunity to first be aware that a resolution or an ordinance is being considered, and then a few weeks later, then voted on by the board. You effectively are the first reading of resolutions. Everything is run through this board, you are given an opportunity to give some citizen input, ask some questions, give some context, and that is wonderful, wonderful feedback for the board members to kind of get a feel for the kind of sensitivities that a particular issue has that's getting ready to come before them the following week. So that's a wonderful role that you provide for them. To your question about speaking out in the community and trying to get feedback from the general community, the only caution I would ask your consideration for, if you're a CAC member, keep in mind you are in an appointed position, not an elected position. I want to be sure that you don't confuse the general public that you might be talking with between what is your role versus what is the elected person's role. You provide a wonderful and important feedback, and you absolutely can and should try to get a sense of issues in the community so you can share that through your appointed role, but always be careful not to confuse the general public that yours is not the elected position, but is instead the appointed position. Lastly, somebody mentioned tours. I am working up a schedule to provide an opportunity for each of you to get a eyes-on opportunity to see some of our facilities. I'll be issuing a few dates over the next 2 or 3 weeks that if they can fit your schedule, you can call and we'll provide you some individual tours of facilities such as our SCADA system. We'll take you to one of our water wells. We'd definitely like to get you through our large central water reclamation facility, wastewater treatment plant. If you have an interest, we'd like to take you to the MRF, the materials recovery facility as well.
Thank you, Bruce. Ms. Benson?
Yeah, thank you, and I think Mr. Woody certainly gave good advice regarding that. I would say you have 2 roles as a Citizen Advisory Committee. One is to advise the board. I mean, you double our level of expertise and our reach into the community by geographic diversity and by having different professional skills. And so it's very valuable for us to hear your input as we look at these things. So you are an advisor to the board, and we listen carefully. We certainly do take your comments very seriously. But the second is that you are also ambassadors. You know, once you take on the role as a CAC member, I think you suddenly are aware of what good work the ECUA does. And by going into the community, by them seeing that you have this role as a CAC, you extend our goodwill. And, you know, truthfully, we're not in a very sexy business. and it's easy to hate people who are a monopoly. But you become a face of goodwill, and that is equally valuable. And I concur with Mr. Woody's admonition that you can't speak for the utility in an elected official capacity, but you can be our ambassador. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Yes, ma'am. When I was asking questions at my initial meeting, I vacillated back and forth whether to say anything initially at all. But having some clear guidelines, and I don't know if I want to call it a job description, you know, the difference between an appointee and an elected position. I went out into the community after speaking with Mr. Williams just to see what their concerns were, but more importantly, I wanted to see what was working. Unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of what was working. What I got a lot of is what the concerns were, and I did not want to just arbitrarily give them an answer and it be completely incorrect, especially if it was not my role. So my question is do we have something that the equivalent of a job description, you know, what our responsibilities as an advisory person to the committee is and what we're supposed to be doing for the county, and probably just as important, what we should not be saying or issues that we should not attempt to address?
Thank you. Mr. Brown, I don't know that we have anything like that in writing, but I like your question a lot, and I think maybe we need to come up with one. So Robert's not here, but I will leave that to Bruce and Robert, Mr. Woody and Mr. Beasley, to come up with a brief description of the role of a citizen advisory committee member. But it is, I think you did hear Ms. Benson and Mr. Woody, as well as Mr. Perkins, all state that it is a two-way role, number one.
Yes, ma'am.
It's to listen to what people, their concerns, and make sure that they know who their representative is for those concerns. And then to be, as you learn more about the utility, and I appreciate that you didn't answer those questions you didn't know. A lot of times I've heard CAC members in the community speaking on behalf of the ECUA and incorrectly. And so I appreciate that you didn't just try to answer a question. I appreciate that you want to get the right answer. And so as we move through these meetings, we're going to have some of our staff come up and introduce themselves to you along the way. We talked about this last month, have them introduce themselves when they come up to speak, but we're also going to have them come up and talk about their fields so that you all know what they do and know who those questions might go to. So if it has to do with lift stations, it would go to Jerry. If it has to do with I&I, go to Don or Stacy or, Brian or whoever, So that's a very good question, and I do think we'll work on that for you. I think Mr. Woody's over there writing right now what he's going to do.
If I may add one thing.
Yes,
that-
sir,
that
please
You just
do.
mentioned a couple of different facilities and what they actually do. That type of contact list and what they do in particular or specifically
Yes.
would be of great assistance.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Woody said he's trying to put some tours together for you of the Central Reclamation
Yes, ma'am.
facility, as well as the other facilities, the material recycle facility and the compost facility. And I think it's a great thing, we did have some CAC members and board members that had been here for a long time. And I love seeing all this new blood on this dais. And so, but along with new blood, we need to really be mindful that you don't know.
Lack of
I
knowledge.
remember I got appointed to the Board of Dentistry. And I was like a fish out of water. I was like, what in the world did I get
Right.
myself into? And it took me 2 or 3 years to figure out. This is another reason I don't like term limits, because it takes, even you, a CAC member, or me, a board member, it takes 4 to 8 years just to learn everything that goes on in the utility.
Yeah, that's
Thank-
why I didn't say anything about term limits, because I definitely do not agree, but
Thank you.
exhibit.
Ms. Schneier, you started the conversation, correct? Do you have another question?
Well, I have had customers contact me, like when we had a vacancy in District 3 after Mr. McCorvey died. So I had customers contact me with issues, and I went out and spoke with them, looked at their bill, and acted as an intercessor, where I contacted customer service, or I contacted the executive director or Mr. Rudd, and got the issue resolved. So I just kind of acted as an intercessor, but I also try to educate the public, with.
I think there's probably a fine line there on getting them to the right party and doing it
Right,
yourself.
yeah, I got them to the right person, or I got the information from the right person for them, and their issue was resolved. But if you do any group tours of the Central Water Reclamation Facility or any of the operations, I would like to be involved. I've been on tours of probably pretty much everything, but every time you go on a tour, you learn something new. And it is just amazing. It's so complicated and so overwhelming, and there's so much to learn. You can't learn it in one tour. You won't learn it in 1 year. It's awesome.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have tentatively a tour scheduled for this coming Thursday. And Madam Chair, if you will allow Mr. Palmer
Absolutely.
to speak to what we plan to tour on Tuesday, then I know Mr. Brown and Mrs. Cremati have been invited just to keep the issue of sunshine out of that picture.
Very
So anybody else who would not be,
Thank-
would not violate
Right.
sunshine would be more than welcome. But I wanted Mr. Palmer, if he would, Madam Chair, to just make sure that we're going.
If I may,
And I'm going to let Mr. Woody speak about this.
Madam Chair, when I had mentioned earlier about tours, had two, maybe three thoughts of concern. Number one, as you've already eloquently mentioned, sunshine is a concern. Because you're voting members on these committees, Sunshine states that any time that you are meeting and discussing policy issues and whatnot, and those things naturally will come up during a tour, as you can well imagine. So I think it's appropriate and defensible to say that if there's going to be more than a single one of you attending a tour at any one point in time, we would have to actually provide notice. 3 days, post it, which means the media or anybody else could attend as well. What I had originally proposed is we provide a series of dates. You call, we'll give you individual tours. If you would like to do that as a group, we certainly can, but we just need more advanced notice to be able to do that because we would have to post it so that we are in compliance with the Sunshine Law. Of course, that then does open the possibility that you may have members of the general public or the media or others also attend the very same tour. That's just the world we live in.
Please
I'm
continue,
sorry.
Mr. Williams.
Okay, I'm fine. I just want to know then, is my tour still on for Thursday? And you can publicly notice those who need to attend after that, but I want to get my ball rolling.
Yeah,
Thank
Mr.
you, sir.
Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
yeah, you're welcome to have a tour. We're set up to have a tour with you, but if we're going to have other members of the Citizens Advisory Committee, we have to advertise and we'll have to set another date. So if, I was going to get with you after the meeting to confirm whether you wanted to do it just yourself or reschedule. So.
He wants to do it just himself. Very good. And I do invite you all to make a date with the administrator to look at the facilities. Thank you for your question. Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, there's a lot more scrutiny once you become, a Citizens Advisory Committee member or board member. You have the Sunshine Law and everything, so the individual tours would probably work better, although I like the idea of group tours because I would like the public and the press and everything to go on these tours. I think it would be a good thing. We got a good story to tell. The problem there is that we're all human and you're in close quarters and you could say something to one of the other members that might come up for a vote. Well, then you've got a Sunshine Law violation. So it's better to be safe rather than sorry on those. So the individual tours, they could stagger them and do 2 or 3 a day. They can get that done, and so that's probably the safest way to do it. But the other thing I wanted to speak on was that as a board member, when I appoint or nominate a Citizen Advisory Committee member, I nominate someone based on their intelligence, their character, and I don't nominate somebody who agrees with me. I nominate somebody who does what they think is right. Ms. Ritz and I often disagree on issues, but I value her input and I need to hear it. If I only heard from people that agree with me all the time, I'd only be getting one side of the story. And so, while I'm okay with us providing some basic guidelines for CAC members or anything, I would pretty strongly oppose anything that put any limitations or restrictions on CAC members. I think we can, say, hey, these are guidelines or suggestions, but I don't want us to say, oh, you can't talk to the public or you can't, call on behalf of a constituent to try and, resolve their bill issue or anything like that.
I agree. Thank you. I chose my CAC member. Well, actually, Ms. Benson chose my first CAC member. I think district lines may have been different or something, and I ended up with Ms. yeah, Miss Ben in my district, and she was so wonderful that I just she just stayed there for a long time, and then, and I've always enjoyed Chuck being on the board because he knows so much about HR and insurance, and when it comes to that time of year, I'm a layperson when it comes to insurance and HR issues like that, payroll and whatever. So I appreciate him being there answering those questions. But he doesn't always agree with me. So I think you're right, Mr. Perkins. Sometimes you agree with your CAC member and sometimes you don't, and that doesn't mean your CAC member's wrong. But we do appreciate your input. I think you heard that from all of us. So I don't think the CAC's going anywhere, regardless of what the district, the SAD says, verbiage is. And thank you. Do I have anyone for the second open forum? Any other questions, comments? Mr. Williams?
Madam Chair, thank you. I didn't want to be, or appear to be selfish in my thoughts. So, Mr. Woody, if you're trying to put in place a tour and want to do it a certain way, then I'm okay with waiting until such a time. But if it works well for what we have scheduled, okay, fine. If you want to wait, just let me know.
I want to provide the maximum opportunities for what individual members are interested in. So my intention will be to lay out a host of dates that are available, have you contact us about the dates that work best for you. I'll have a little menu of possible sites to tour, and we'll try to schedule it in a way that fits your schedule and your interest the best.
Yeah, I think he had already had something set up with Don for Thursday this week, so
Right.
you're fine with that.
Yeah. Just like that.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, ma'am. Maybe I should rephrase this in my head. I wanted to have that tour, and I know the sunshine law was going to be somewhat of a sticking point, but I think I want to do mine individually so I can get a good working knowledge before it is, I've got people in my district riding along and I have a question that no one else would have thought about asking, then I'm just opening up a whole new can of worms. I would just prefer not to do that. So on my behalf, I would like to have, if at all possible, that individual tour first to negate getting into any situation with the sunshine law before the group comes along.
Ms. Benson?
You saw me anticipating.
I did.
You
And I-
just pointed out the greatest problem with the sunshine law. All of our pronouncements are in an open meeting, and there's this tendency not to want to say something that might sound dumb. And so sometimes the sunshine law inhibits good communication and discussion. Because sometimes throwing out a dumb idea leads to good ideas. But, so anyway, you're a quick learner.
I always love the questions on the CAC. They're good questions. No question is dumb. Every question is good. Mr. Stevens?
Oh, would simply like to say I've got the public hearing to go speak at right now, so just want to thank my fellow board members for your time and the CAC members, and just reiterate what Ms. Campbell said, is that I personally, and I think I speak for, I can't speak for all the board members, make a statement that I very much value each and every one of you all's input and the CAC, so thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any further comments or questions? If not, you are adjourned.